Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, Dara Kiernan of KPI Consulting Ireland and the author of Freefall, Leadership Lessons from the Skies, has 25 years of experience leading high-performing teams, along with 2 decades in the Irish comedy circuit, so he brings a unique blend of expertise and energy to his work. Dara joins me now to discuss Freefall, Leadership Lessons from the Skies. But Dara, before we discuss your book, I'd like to learn about your experience in stand-up comedy.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Karl. Yeah, really nice to be here. Well, one thing I've always said about 20 years experience in stand-up comedy, the stand-up comedy business, there's no laughing matter in it. There just isn't. The politics, the egos, the people, the best people in stand-up comedy are the audience. I got into it first because it's something I always wanted to do, and I got a baptism of fire because my first gig was the International Bar, so the home of Irish comedy, and I mean it was just fantastic. I always thought that it was a place for me, but I didn't realize there were so many learnings that I had to, so many pieces that link into leadership, for example, like the things about self-awareness, about feedback, about dealing with adversity and dealing with a live audience who don't care. They're not looking at you because they want a promotion. They're giving you raw feedback.
So what was the greatest lesson that you learned from comedy, and how did you apply this to the business environment?
When I started doing stand-up comedy, what I did was I wrote a set and I made up situations. I thought at the time I didn't have that really interest in a life, and I was in leadership. I mean, God, that's boring. How do you make that funny, So I started making up scenarios and I made up stories, but I'm not a good actor. So I couldn't act them out. Now, the likes of some of these guys, Tommy Tiernans and the Dara O'Briens, they're great actors as well. So they can make up a totally made up scenario and live it like it's theirs. So what I found what I needed to do when those gags weren't working well, I needed to lean back on the reality of my life. In some area, I was adopted into a white South African family living in Dublin. And just the way they brought us up compared to how some of my mates got brought up was just made comedy gold. So I never realized it. So when I started really delving down through something that was true to my heart, and it became more authentic, people believed it more, and they came along on the journey with me. So that was, for me, one of the biggest things was writing the material that was true to me, but also in a manner that the audience understood it. Because beforehand, I was writing jokes that I was making up, thinking they were funny myself, but didn't actually know that didn't realize there are people sitting there listening to me. So you have to write it for the people listening to you. And that was a big thing for stand-up comedy. And also communication, knowing how to put those words together. That's a key thing,
And if we fast forward to today, Dara, your day job as such is helping to develop high-performance teams. But who is your typical client, and what process do you follow when you engage with them?
I'm lucky enough that my client base spreads across across the public and private sector, across various different industries, from financial services to healthcare to local authorities to so many different industries, to IT. And the thing I've always believed over the years is leadership is the true transferable skill. It doesn't matter about the content of the business. It doesn't matter about what the business is building. I don't need to know how to save lives. I worked in the agency for 2.5 years. I don't need to know how to save lives, but I do need to know how to empower and motivate and support the people who are doing it, and how to bring them together as a team. I remember when I started with them first, I was brought into a room of 300 clinical people, and I was introducing myself to them, and I told them I had 15 years experience in financial services, and you could see like the faces just like, what the hell is this guy doing here? And one person was brave enough and maybe mouthy enough to shout out, well, what are you going to do for us? What do you know about healthcare? I said, well, the thing is, I don't need to. I have 300 people staring back at me right now with all of the knowledge that we need. We don't need another person with that knowledge. I'm bringing in my knowledge, and my knowledge is about building teams, supporting you guys, empowering you to be the very best that you can be, and helping you with the systems and the processes to make it as quick and easy for you.
Yeah, so you were involved with the HSE during their COVID-19 response plan. So talk to us about that role and the specifics of it.
Yeah, I was initially contacted to come in and look at how this was just immediately after the cyber attack, and I am a contact center guy. I have built my entire career has been based around customer facing teams. Most of the time, I get brought into businesses because they think their systems are wrong or their processes are wrong. And what happens is it generally falls back on the leadership, and the leadership structure is not the way it should be. But the HSE, I got called in. They were crippled. They needed somebody to come in, and what I thought was initially service improvement role. When I drove in and parked the car, I was met by somebody in training, and they said, "I believe you're the general manager of the whole contact center." I went, "Okay, we could do that too." So I spent 9 months doing that, and that was all about restructuring the way that the people were and the hierarchies within the operation. There was a big gap between the people on the floor and the management in the offices, and I had to pull that together.
In your book, Freefall, Leadership Lessons from the Skies, you draw parallels between a skydive and leadership. What was your rationale for this comparison?
Leadership is so subjective. It's just, and that's why I love it. Anything can happen on a daily basis, and there's no scenario the exact same. The one I always say, in businesses, all your process and procedures are all fixed. But the one thing that's the biggest issue you'll always have is the variables, and the variables are the people. That's be it your staff, your customers, whatever.
Because of emotions.
Because of emotions. It's so important to look at. So what I want to do is I thought, well, how am I going to relay this to people who are struggling with these areas and dealing with leadership issues of their own? And the biggest thing for me with training wasn't about the academic side of it and what about ticking the box about A, B, C, and D. It was about truly understanding what leadership means and making it engaging and entertaining and enjoyable so that they'll continue reading it. And if you can make a parallel to something outside of the corporate environment that people can lean on. I always say to people when they come to me in a panic and there's a crisis, I just use this phrase, have you pulled the cord yet? Or are you still hurtling to the ground at 120 mile an hour? Because if you're still at that speed, the slightest move you make will send you off course. You need to pull the cord, slow yourself down. And I thought, well, that's the analogy I need to use. The next book is going to be about stand-up, so that'll be a bit funnier than this one. But it was all about just trying to say to people, look, when it's a life and death situation, there are certain things you need to be in control of. You need to be in control of your emotions. You need to embrace fear, and lead with courage. And the way it's not about being fearless. It's about managing that fear, because everybody's afraid jumping out of a plane. You've got to manage your fear.
So in your opinion, what traits make a great leader?
The biggest thing, you have to be a people person. You have to have empathy. You have to care. You have to realize that when you become a leader, that you now work for the team rather than the team working for you. You're not the big boss. That's just, throw that out of your head. You need to have integrity. You need to be trusting. There needs to be trust. You need to be honest. You can't hide behind. A lot of corporate organizations will say, be careful what you say to our staff. Be careful what you do here. Don't do this. Don't do that. And it doesn't work. You have to work in it as a team. You've got to work with the people around you. The authenticity of it. I always talk about, my thing is about, there is more to a leader than what you get taught in the corporate environment. Anybody said to me that leave your personal life at the door, I've never learned anything from that person. And we know kind of what they mean, but you have to know what's going on in a person's personal life. You have to, so that you can engage with them. I've sat around boardroom tables and I've known nothing about the other people around those tables, nothing about their personal lives, and we've clashed. because all we're doing is bouncing back these corporate personas that we have.
And buzzwords.
And we love an old buzzword. Financial services love an old buzzword. But if you don't bring your personal game to the table, you're not being authentic. There's nothing wrong. For years, I kept my stand-up comedy to the side because I thought, they won't take me seriously. They think I'm a joker. They kept my skydiving because I think I'm too big a risk taker. And in some places they would have done. But that's what made me. And it's only when I started opening up about those things. And funnily, the stand-up comedy came because one of my staff just came to a show one night. And God, I nearly collapsed, And, but then it was out. And it was when it came out, I went, well, do you know what? I feel freer now. Now I don't have to hide things. I can just say, hey, this is what I've learned from stand-up. This is how I can stand and talk in front of a room of 100 people.
The recruitment and retention of staff is often critical for building a successful team. So what advice do you share in your book about sky-high recruitment?
The thing about recruitment and retention, I was speaking to somebody recently about this, and the trick is you've got to look at how the actions you do on a daily basis every day in the office when your staff view you and how you behave with them. And you've got to think about the impact they have in the other parts of the staff member's life. So when I talk about bringing your personal life into leadership, let's think of the staff member bringing their job back out into their personal life. So on a Friday, if you're sending all your team home on a Friday, they've had fun, they've achieved their goals, they're excited about coming back in on a Monday. All they talk about at the weekend to their partners, to their friends in the pub, to wherever they happen to be, they talk about, God, this place, we were throwing dart, I was playing with the golf thing and I was doing this, and you know what, I won. They gave me an Easter egg in June. I mean, what the hell are we doing with an Easter egg in June? But we got, and all of these things, when they start talking about what you're doing with them, the people, they want to stay. Their family members are saying, you can't leave that job. You're in much better form when you come home from that job than you were in the previous job. And on the flip, if you're coming home miserable from that job, your family are telling you to leave. And no matter how good a leader you are, you will never compete with friends and family. You're on a loser. So you've got to constantly keep them upbeat and motivated and engaged. And you can only do that with being there and listening to them and showing that you care.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Dara Kiernan of KPI Consulting Ireland and the author of Freefall, Leadership Lessons from the Skies.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.